All right. Well, we're following mainstream media. We're going to talk now about NPR because they have lost the plot completely. They say now that the First Amendment is a problem for their liberal ideological news network that is freedom of information. They don't like it. Your rights to information is something they are very worried about because they are off the deep end. Now, this video is being shared today, and it's a hot topic because of NPR's massive fail, because they are so out of touch and they are a propaganda machine, not a news network. Here is their new CEO, recently hired, Catherine Mayer, saying that the First Amendment is a threat to reporters.
The number one challenge here that we see and is, of course, the First Amendment in the United States is a fairly robust protection of rights, and that is a protection of rights both for platforms, which I actually think is very important, that platforms have those rights to be able to regulate what kind of content they want on their sites. But it also means that it is a little bit tricky to really address some of the real challenges of where does bad information come from and sort of the influence peddlers who have made a real market economy around it.
So the First Amendment is really tricky.
So NPR should have it, but you should not have it. That's what she thinks. Okay. Now, this has been shared because a brave NPR news reporter published a heartbreaking piece about how NPR is not reporting the news because they have been ideologically captured by the left, and he was punished for it. So this story, to me, answers a lot of questions because Clayton and I, when we were in mainstream media, I don't think we felt that people were purposely not looking at news stories and reporting them only from there. We certainly saw bias, but nothing near like what we saw during the COVID pandemic, where it was like, nope, vaccine's safe and effective. We're not even going to look. We're not going to look there at all. Or not. I don't know how this happened, but this brave man lays it out, and I think that we're going to go over it because it resonates with me a lot. And this matters a lot because NPR is publicly funded, so our tax dollars are going towards this non-journalism for ideology for only one political side. Here is the NPR news editor, Yuri Berliner, and this is NPR reporting on itself, saying that they suspended him. He actually resigned today, just a few hours ago, because the CEO, this woman that we just showed you, instead of taking the lesson of what he had to say with humility and maybe thinking about it, no, she maligned him and disparaged him. Here is his resignation. He says, I'm resigning. It's a great American institution, he says, and he doesn't support defunding NPR. Although that's trending anyway. He says, mostly it's because the CEO is disparaging me. She seems like she's a real humble piece of work, don't you think? This is hilarious because on the reporting of this story, NPR assures us that they can report on themselves. They're like, here's a disclosure. This is an NPR story about an NPR story. So we followed our protocol and we think that that's all good. Okay. Now, he was suspended because he wrote this piece for the Free Press, which, again, I think is eye-opening. I encourage you to read it in its entirety. What he says is that he was a bleeding heart liberal who drove a Subaru. And indeed, if you look at his coverage, I'm sure there's lots of things you may not agree with. But he says he at least understood when he took the job that NPR had a wide variety of an audience. It was not just liberals. They had conservatives too, and a lot of independents. And now, though, he says they've just stopped reporting stories, even if they so much as smell conservative, and that's not journalism. Now, maybe you think, no, NPR, it's always been liberal. But he points out that that's not the case. What really started to turn away all of their audience, except this small tribe of white liberals, was Trump and Russiagate. He says that persistent rumors that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia over the election became catnip that drove reporting. So reporters just loved it because they hated Trump so much. So they just kept having Adam Schiff on because that was his shtick. He said even when the Mueller report found no credible evidence of collusion, NPR's coverage was sparse and Russiagate just faded from our programming. He said it's one thing to swing and miss, like, okay, you got it wrong. I felt like that. I listened to Rachel Maddow. I swallowed all that crap. Okay, I need to figure out why I believed that then. What did I not look at? NPR did not do that. Instead, they just moved on with no mea culpa. He said, no self-reflection, and it just spun out of control from there. Other ways that they didn't follow journalistic protocol: Hunter Biden's laptop, they threw it out because they wanted to. And they never apologized when that became a legitimate story. The COVID lab leak, they called the lab leak theory crazy. When it turned out not to be crazy, they did not apologize. They didn't say, oh, well, we previously thought this. Here's what they said when we introduced our coverage. We said, nope, scientific evidence overwhelmingly points to a natural origin. And when a colleague said, well, why is that? Then the editorial was like, hey, this is like weapons of mass destruction. We're not going to be taken fooled again. And he's like, that didn't make any sense. Because why are we only deciding we're not going to be fooled on certain narratives? Here's what he says about the coverage of George Floyd. And I think that this is really poignant. He says, this began a difficult question of racism. Is America, as progressive activists claim, beset by systemic racism in the 2020s in law enforcement, education, housing, and everywhere? He said, we happen to have very powerful tools for answering these questions. Journalism. Journalism lets that evidence lead the way. But instead of doing journalism after George Floyd's death, he said the message from the top was clear. America's infestation with systemic racism was declared loud and clear. It's a given. NPR's mission is to change it. But that is dishonest. And I would love to refer you now to this great book by Coleman Hughes, its new book called The End of Race Politics. And I will admit to you that I am showing you his picture because he's a black man. And if a black man says that race politics is deceiving us, it lands very differently than when a white man says it in the year 2024. I lament that, but I think it's true. Coleman Hughes quite correctly writes that most of what you are told is racism is not, because he looks at the data. He's reported it. NPR has not. In fact, NPR did the opposite. They led with the conclusion that we live in a racist society, whether it exists or not, and they went so far as to track race, gender, and ethnicity in all of their sources to make sure they were getting enough diversity in their reporting. So it's nice to get a well-rounded perspective of your stories, sure, right? But if you're more worried about the sources than the actual news, you're biasing your own reporting, and most likely the story too, and you're letting down your audience. So that's dumb. And if, I know I've reported many times how the media disproportionately would cover crimes of Black people. Well, they also now are disproportionately omitting crimes with white victims. And so their software should have told them that.
Who programmed this software? Was it AI?
They made it.
Oh, so
they made it themselves.
Again, this is like Google Gemini, right? So
yeah.
Again, as Elon Musk points out, put crappy inputs in, you get crappy inputs out.
Right. Yeah. And he says that a lot of the language that NPR reporting has been captured by interest groups. Mostly we can assume these are sort of young, straight out of college, coddled babies whose parents in university have expected very little real life out of them. So they expect to go into the newsroom and say, we need representation. We understand society better than older white people. Here, he said, is a list of all of the groups that started to form at NPR and to inform how the network would cover certain things. So it's, Latinx, these marginalized genders group. These are all the groups. I don't need to read them to you. You can see that would have meetings and then decide how NPR would cover things because their representation they felt was historically not good and they were going to change that. And all of this, he says, leads to the absence of viewpoint diversity. He did try to tell his colleagues this in a meeting, and here's what happened. He basically got crickets. He looked at voter registration for the newsroom, found that there were 0 Republicans working in the newsroom. He presented his findings to an all-hands staff, and he said the response was hostile. It wasn't hostile. It was worse. It was profound indifference. So these same people that are grouping up saying that they love diversity, really they love diversity if it's transgender groups or Latin groups or Jewish groups. But when it's diversity of thought, they don't love that. They don't love that at all. They love closed tribes. Now, he went further. He tried to schedule a meeting with the CEO, and the CEO canceled the meeting on the day of the meeting and said, oh, sorry, I got busy. He told him, he's like, I would like to talk to you about this exact thing. And he's like, sounds great. I'll get back to you. He never did. Canceled the meeting. And yet they wonder why their audience is dwindling, why they're mostly still white elites, why only 3 in 10 people say they trust NPR. So what does he get for all of this? He gets a suspension. The CEO maligns him and he quits. Now, if NPR was a principled organization, they would say, this is interesting. We have been doing this, or have we? Can we do some soul searching? Can we be better? We're bleeding an audience here. People don't trust us. Maybe we can think about how we have allowed an entire generation of young people to push their sort of inexperienced ideology from the bottom up because they're used to being coddled. And we need to think about actual diversity of thought. They did not do that. They did none of that. Instead, they are now accusing him of feeding conservative narratives. Here is, again, NPR reporting on itself, saying that the peace in the free press angered many of his colleagues, led NPR leaders to announce monthly internal reviews of the network's coverage, and gave fresh ammunition to conservative and partisan Republican critics of NPR, including former President Trump. Now, NPR says that Berliner's article pissed off the staff because, of course, they don't want to actually address actual bias. So did they respond to his accusations about Russiagate or Hunter Biden or COVID or race? Of course they don't, because those things are inexcusable. They're not learning the lesson. They're literally punishing the messenger, shooting the messenger by doing all of this stuff. And here is what they say they're going to do, which is basically what he accused them of doing is, oh, okay, well, we have this person. She's going to now lead these monthly meetings to ask these questions each month. Did we capture the diversity of the country? Racial, ethnic, religious, economic, political, geographic. Did we offer coverage that helped them understand better? Like these cute little, dumb people who listen to NPR, are we helping them understand the world better? Are we having representation in the news? I mean, no one cares about representation in the news if it gets in the way of the actual news. Read the room, NPR. So are they really counting their biases? No, they're not. They're refusing to do this, and they won't learn the lesson. And yes, NPR is partially funded by Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is funded by the federal government. So we pay them to be tone-deaf elites, and we get nothing for it, which makes me very sad because it means that the media doesn't want to learn to be better. They think they're better than you. And when a mirror is put in front of their faces, they see nothing. They see nothing wrong. They don't see how ugly they are. And they want just to produce things that make them feel superior. We saw this earlier this week when this clip went viral. This is Katie Couric talking about MAGA voters.
And I feel like, to your point, Bill, the socioeconomic disparities are a lot, and class resentment is a lot, and anti-intellectualism and elitism is what is driving many of these anti-establishment, which are Trump voters, or anti-establishment voters. So I think that is a huge problem that we have to address. I mean, globalization and, the transition from an industrial to a technological society. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been jealous of what someone else has or resentful. It is such a corroding and bitter, almost bile feeling.
What the hell is she talking about?
Let me tell you, Clayton, because Clayton, let's role play. I get everything I want. Have you ever, does that happen to you, or have you ever been jealous too? Have you ever not got what you want?
I can't think of it. No, I can't. No,
we don't, right? Because we're elitists.
Two elitists sitting on a show.
You know,
talking
if you live in Ohio and you worked at a factory that's been shut down because of high-tech progress, you're corroded by jealousy for people like us. And that's
like
why
us,
you would vote for Trump.
People like us that understand globalization, understand technological advances.
Because you're just a dummy who worked in a chicken farm and you've been outsourced. You don't know any better. You're anti-intellectual. So those people feel jealous. Have you ever felt jealous? No, right?
No, we haven't felt jealous. We're here on there.
Recently get like her. Did she just recently get her like WEF silver membership card in the mail, and now she's feeling it? Because
she must have. Yeah, Klaus Schwab mailed it in for her. It's like, Katie Couric, you've done very good.
It's actually really hard to be me. I'm so smart, and I always get what I want, so I never feel jealous. But those Trump people, they're just not like that.
There was so much hubris. There was so much condescension in those few sentences. I mean, first of all, looking down her nose, explaining that, like, the power of globalization, why that's so powerful. That ship has sailed, as you're seeing right now with Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
Globalization, you're looking at battle lines being drawn all over the world right now. That ship has sailed, and that ship has failed. Right. So this idea that we're going to offshore all of our manufacturing, we're going to send it all to China under Bill Clinton, we're going to send it all to Mexico. It killed these people. Where do you think all of the MAGA movement came from? It came from you sending their jobs overseas. Mm-hmm. It's like this sort of basket of deplorables, out of touch Hillary Clinton people. And Katie Couric is part of that.
Right. And the anti-intellectualism thing is what really gets me, because she's acting as an elite who is refusing diversity of thought, which is intellectualism. She's refusing to do research about, the economy, COVID, Hunter Biden, any of those things that might explain why someone might not support the Democratic Party. So she's displaying anti-intellectualism while looking down her nose at intellectuals who might actually appreciate doing research.
And I would love to ask her simple questions, like when President Trump yesterday or today, went into Harlem, and they had to close down the streets because thousands of people came out to cheer him. Mm-hmm. He went, he was there for his trial, and they had to close down Harlem, like huge number of streets, thousands of people pouring down the streets to see him in support of him. Like, I'm sure Barack Obama loves that. What would Katie Couric think of all of these MAGA supporters in Harlem
that are anti-intellectual and jealous? Right,
and coming out to show their support and care for Trump. Like, her head is probably
obviously
spinning.
She'd say they don't know what's good for them.
Right.
Exactly. Yes. They
and I
don't know
think
what's good for them.
This is part of the Hillary Clinton, Rachel Maddow playbook, that if you just insult these people, they'll be embarrassed and stop it. Right. And that doesn't work.
Yeah, all you black people, why are you out there in Harlem cheering on Donald Trump? Don't you know any better? Don't you know, as Democrats and here in our little elitist circle?
You're acting gauche.
Yeah.
So stop it. Oh, that's me. Oh, okay. I didn't realize that you thought that then I'm not a Christian Louboutin wearing, elitist. So I'll stop it and be more like you. And then maybe I'll never be jealous in my life and I'll want from nothing. I kind
of guess it worked with Matt Lauer. We don't see him anymore. He kind of, after he was embarrassed, he kind of disappeared.
I guess. Maybe. Yeah. He didn't have a choice. Yeah.
After they discovered his secret door, his locking mechanisms to keep the women in.
Right. So, no, the media is not having a come to Jesus moment anytime soon. They're just going to keep acting like this, and then we'll just keep leaving.
Yeah, the mainstream media is officially dead. NPR is just its latest victim. And it's sad because I used to like NPR back in the day before I really thought that they had like some big agenda. I thought it was calming. I would put it on in the morning.
Sure.
I liked that they had an iPad app at the very beginning of like when the iPad rolled out, and I liked their little interface, and I could pick a few stories and make a little playlist. And it was like, I want to listen to this story about technology. I want to listen to this story about whatever. And it was was nice. It was like pleasant.
Well, he says here that actually people, when he used to say to people, I work for NPR, they'd say, oh, I love NPR. I love this person. I love this thing, and now he says it at parties and people are like, when did that lose its way?
It was like a fart in a
right. And he's
crowd.
like, it's just, I don't have that response anymore because people don't respect it.
Yeah, it really is. It totally lost it.
And I think what we're seeing with all this recent legislation and stuff is this is the desperate time where they're trying to, like, you got social media platforms saying, oh, we're going to give you the most relevant news sources like CNN and all this. It's just they're trying to maintain their control. They're trying to grasp at everything that they have left before they completely crumble. And we're seeing it right before our eyes. And that's why they're coming after independent journalists, because we're winning. We are winning the conversation. We are winning in every metric, but they don't like that. So they're coming after us.
Yeah, but it's heartbreaking for people like Clayton and I who, spent a career and educated ourselves in order to join mainstream media and just see, I liked those people. Those were my colleagues and friends. Why are they refusing to look into things? They're supposed to be journalists. Why are they refusing to look in certain corners?
But look at the ones who are. Look at Megyn Kelly. Look at Tucker Carlson. Look at Don Bongino. The people that got out of that world and are doing it are the most popular on the internet right now.
Yeah, but that's not who just makes up the media. We're thinking of colleagues, Clayton and I, producers and camera people and things like that that are breaking our hearts because we can't have a conversation with those people about any given topic. Like, okay, you're saying this, but I'm going to point you to this research, and they just think we're crazy,
Yeah.
So
it's another world. And by the way, the sort of alternative media in that way, other than websites and blogs, really didn't exist in the way that it does. This is, I think, what you're seeing here, like with our show. And again, like last night, I thanked all of you because last month we hit an amazing record. 25 million of you watched the show, which is amazing across our platforms. So thank you so much. This didn't exist a few years ago. It's as a result of their failures, as a result of their bias, as a result of their inability to cover the stories like that we covered tonight here on the show, that we even exist. If they did their jobs, we wouldn't have to do this.
Yeah,
right?
It turns out people can handle the truth. There's like, you can't handle the truth. We have to spoon feed you what we think you want. No, people can handle the truth and they want it.
Yes. Yeah. And we're seeking the truth on the show. We don't have all the answers, but we're looking for it constantly. So that's our modus operandi here on the show. So,
and we've had circumstances where we covered something and then I realized, oh, there's a whole other angle to that. Let's come back at that story and we'll apologize. That's what it takes in order to earn your trust. We shouldn't know everything, but if you get it wrong, you say, oh, how did I miss that other side? Or how can I make that up? Instead of like, oh, that's just MAGA extremists who want to hear a different side. And that's what they're doing. And that's crazy. And they will answer for this in their sole review. And I don't think you're not going to get a good grade. That's what I'm saying. You're going to get a bad grade on your soul test.
I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. YouTube thinks that you'll actually like this next video right here. It's personalized based on your own viewing habits. So if you watch the video, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think about it. And we will see you next time, everyone.